I want to introduce our moderator today, Linda Klein, and she will lead the rest of the forum with us. Okay, please welcome Linda Klein.
Hi everybody. Welcome to the forum today, and Tom's already given you a nice welcome here. Today we're going to be talking about raising children of mixed descent in Korea. Everything will be in English, however, Kang and I will be speaking in Korean, and then I'll be providing interpretation. So just so you know, it'll be mostly English with some Korean. So our speakers today are Aiden Hammond, Kang and I, and James Kang McCann. And I'll first introduce Aiden, who will be speaking first, and then I'll give you an introduction for the other speakers right before they have their presentation. Aiden he's from Canada, and he's lived in Jeju-do. He moved there in 2000. He's currently living in Seoul, and he's working at half the universities here. He's working at Seoul National University, and then he's also teaching ceramics, art history, and art theory at Kookmin University and Soonmyo Women's University. So he has a young son, and he's going to be telling you more about his experience. So please welcome Aiden Hammond.
Well, first, I'd like to thank the M.A.C.K Foundation for organizing this conference, and I'd like to thank Tana for giving me the burden of being the first speaker. Preparing for this forum, it's been a good opportunity for my wife and I to kind of reflect on raising our son in this kind of biracial, bicultural environment. And so to kind of keep myself focused, I decided to just talk about sort of three things. First thing is identity. So I want to just talk about how we as a couple and as a family kind of approach that idea. The second thing is education, which is the young son is not really something we're concerned about now, it's a big future concern for us. And the third thing I'll talk about is just language and how we approach language and attitude towards using language in the classroom, or not the classroom, sorry, in the home. So first, with identity, to be honest, it's not really an issue that we've had to address directly, just because of our son's young age. And even for myself, it's been it is more of an issue for me. On the program, it says I'm from Canada, but actually I grew up in Rhodesia, in South Africa, Canada, and I spent 10 years in Korea, so I've sort of lived in 3 different cultures. And so I'm a little confused sometimes about sort of telling my son or telling him that I'm Canadian when I don't really feel Canadian as well, because I feel part South African. I've also lived here for a third of my life. There have been some situations where we've had to sort of articulate that to people, and one of the frustrating things for us is we haven't really been able to find, like in Korean, a term or a word we're comfortable using to sort of describe that idea of, Korean Canadian or something. So it's one we're kind of dealing with as we go along, but I think it's one we're going to sort of have to deal with more in the future. One of the questions that Tana gave me to sort of consider was how do we deal with sort of reactions in public, like when we're out. And I think that's something I'd like to just talk a little bit about. First, public reactions have generally been very positive and positive in intent. So people are generally curious and happy and so on. Sometimes it's kind of burdensome. This can sometimes be like a lot of attention, which we sometimes struggle with, and also our child struggles with as well. We've kind of, as parents, sort of taken a passive approach. So by that I mean we encourage him to interact with our neighbors and people we know, but with strangers we encourage him to sort of just be polite but cautious. But it's still, I think you can sort of see sometimes it's kind of a burden from him for that attention and stuff. And right now he's not in school, but I think when he does go to school and sort of is involved in life outside of the home and stuff, I think that would be a bigger issue that he's going to have to confront. And as parents as well, that's an issue that we're kind of trying to figure out what to do with this. Just going through my notes here. So, the other thing I'll just mention next is about education, and I think for most parents that's like a really pressing issue. And we sort of divided our concerns into three areas. The first is just the social aspect, like does he have a welcoming, supportive environment in the school, and can he fit in and respect support from the school, from the administration, and from the students as well. That's a big concern of ours in having environments for children in a public school. The other issue is the actual education, because it kind of deals with, because most of us know public school education is very focused, especially middle school and high school, is very focused on entrance exams. There doesn't seem to be any or much significant physical education program or art education program in those schools, and which we both feel is kind of important for a child. So we're a little concerned about that. The other issue which we are concerned about is, of course, private education, the enormous amount of time and money that has to go into private education. Well, I'm sort of repeating things I think everybody's sort of thought about thought about just by reading the rules and so on. One of the things we have been looking at is alternative schools, because they do seem to provide a focus and a curriculum that we're very comfortable with. One of the problems, though, is just their availability and their location. A lot of the, we live in the city, but a lot of the schools are on the outskirts of the city. So it's a bit hard to, if we want to send our child to that school, then we have to move house or move jobs and stuff. So that's a big concern as well. And of course, that also is connected with the financial concerns with education, like the high cost of the international schools and private education. So all those issues together with education are big issues. I guess the main one, though, for us is the first one I mentioned about a welcoming and supportive environment for biracial children. But I don't think that it's just a concern that's exclusive to just parents of biracial children. I think every child and every parent should expect that from the school they go to. One thing we were sort of talking about is that maybe as members of a very visible minority, that we maybe take a lead in sort of promoting these kinds of values and those kinds of approaches in public education. The third thing I'd like to just sort of mention is about language. And I was kind of expecting maybe more people with parents or more parents with kids. But I think this is just some issues that I'd like to just talk about, and maybe this can be relevant to the education as well. We raised our son in a bilingual environment, and his mother tongue is Korean. He's fairly fluent in English as well. We don't really have any communication problems, except the kind of normal communication problems parents have with 3-year-old kids. So it hasn't really been an issue using both languages. But we do face a lot of comments from other people who are kind of concerned that the two languages kind of confuse him or give him stress and that kind of thing. And that's something I'd like to address directly. From my own studies in applied linguistics, I also did some work in the study of bilingualism. That issue of confusing the child in this context can context we've created is not something I'm concerned about at all. I think the issue right now, sorry, I lost my place here. The main issue, I think, is making sure that the first language, and in this case Korean, the first language receives support. Because we live in Korea and we're kind of surrounded by that first language, it's not really an issue. But if we move to Canada or a third country, maintaining that support in the first language would be really critical for its cognitive development and wisdom. And I think that's something that a lot of people kind of miss. And if I'm talking from the perspective of a couple where you've got a native Korean speaker and a native English speaker, but if there's a biracial couple living in Korea where neither partner is a native speaker of Korean, I think that issue of the first language is really, really critical for their child's development. And also just being able to support that language in the home and outside of the home. So some of the things that we've done and that I would like to kind of recommend to parents of young children is just three things. The first one is encouraging a child to kind of play with language. I think parents kind of get too stressed out about what's right, what's wrong, and they have to learn it. And we've done a lot to sort of just encourage them just to play with it, like whether it's drawing letters and coloring them in, or building the letters out of Lego blocks, or singing nonsense songs. But I think that element of play with language, especially if it's a second language, kind of reduces some of the stress, which is kind of related to this idea of like not over-teaching the second language, especially at a young age. I think it's important to just make the language like a part of their life, so that they can just use it when they have to, and use it to communicate things. That, you know, speaking in English is not like a lesson to be learned. So often when we're correcting a language error or a language mistake, we just pattern back the correct form. We don't get out the textbook or, you know, flashcard review or anything like that. It's just talking and using it in kind of a natural setting. And the last thing, which I think, if I was to give some advice to parents, would be read stories with your children. Excuse me. And then talk about the stories with your kids. Because I think if that second language is kind of in a it's kind of in a deficiency, like it's something that, you know, he only uses with dad, or he doesn't use in the context of school or everyday life outside of the home, but it's something he uses with dad, then I think you have to build a context where it's not just you and dad talking about, you know, what to do or cleaning dishes or cleaning the room and stuff, that you're talking about bigger things. And so talking about stories, I think is really important to just getting the children comfortable with language. I think those three things that I mentioned, the idea of playing, not over-teaching, and reading, they can be applied both to Korean and any second language. But I think if neither parent is a native speaker of Korean in this context here, then there's some additional challenges that parents face, mainly the supporting the mother tongue language, whatever language that is. So that brings me to the end. I think this discussion that we're having, I'm kind of looking forward to, because it's not one that your typical parent has, where you could sort of really think about the identity of your child, or the context in which they're growing up, or the context you're kind of creating for your child. And I'd also like to add